Today we're going to talk about exploring real market needs. And I want to emphasize the term real here, and that oftentimes I have students that have an idea they came up with, they dreamt about it, they thought about it in the shower, it just was a kind of an epiphany, but it may not be a real need. And so with that, what we're going to look at today is how you begin to try and segment the things that are real market needs from the things that might be novel ideas, but perhaps there's not a market opportunity for it. Specifically, when we look at building a successful company, we want to introduce a product or service that satisfy customer needs or wants in a better way than competitors. And again, we'll use the terms needs and wants somewhat interchangeably. Many of us buy more of what we want versus what we need, but there's also a lot of interchange within that. So in that way, again, when we talk about needs and wants, we're kind of commingling the terms and using them synonymously. The other piece of the equation when we determine what to buy is that of price. And it's not necessarily the cheapest price, it's not necessarily the highest price, but it's a price that the company has set as something that makes sense for their business model and the value proposition they have for customers and the needs and wants that they're fulfilling. So in that way, when we begin to think about real market needs, we're going to look at both sides of this, of both the need or the want of the customer, but as well as how do you price things appropriately. So in that way, when we think about understanding needs, it's a question of, is there a problem that's unsolved? And we talked about this company, Squarespace, that has the 100 employees, that is valued at over $100 million. And it came with, again, a computer science student being unhappy with the existing web publishing tools that were out there. And he built something, not with the intent of starting a company, he built something to help him build websites easy. He had some ideas and some thoughts on creating multiple websites. He didn't want to do them all from scratch, so he started building a series of tools that he could use. He showed it to his friend. Friend said, "That's pretty cool. I'll pay you $500 for that." What did he think then? There might be other people that I can sell this to. And so in that way, again, solved his own problem. Google, same thing. They did not sit down intending to start a company. They didn't write a business plan intending to start a company. They were students doing research, wanted to have a more effective search technology, built that for themselves. Friends started using it, classmates started using it, campus started using it, and then later, the thought was, we could build a business on this. So again, solving your own problem can often be a starting point. And again, thinking about a better way. And there are some industries that, again, had not evolved for a long time. The rental car market had not evolved for a long time until the Zipcars and, again, these other aspects of being able to have a distributed, easy pickup, drop-off, low price, rent by the hour instead of rent by the day. If you need to go to the grocery store, you probably don't want to pay 24 hours of rental car pricing to do that. You might want to pay an hour or two, and that's what Zipcar does. You pay by the hour. And again, pricing, and we again use the word better pricing and not necessarily lower pricing. Few of us will go into a store and say, I'm going to buy the cheapest shampoo, the cheapest milk, and the cheapest underwear. We're looking at pricing. We might not necessarily go in and say, oh, I'm just going to buy the most expensive of everything. But we think about, what do I like? Perhaps ingredients. We pay attention to the branding. Do we like the colors? Do we like the shape? Do we like the feature and the function? And that influences our decision. So price influences, but seldom do we just necessarily decide on the cheapest. So how do you see these needs, and how do you recognize that? And then again, it's important to recognize that being a little bit better as a startup probably isn't enough. Why is that the case? If you like a brand, if you like a product, if you like a piece of apparel, if you like a certain beverage, what would make you switch? What will make you switch away?
to something that's else does a similar product
Okay.
better and it has better maybe features, better
Okay.
to offer.
So there's something that's, an improvement and a noticeable improvement over what you already have. Particularly if you're happy with what you already have, it's going to take something to really get you over the edge and to get you transition out of that. But if it's something you've never had before, and this is where, again, what we're talking about with first mover advantages, if it's something you've never had before or if it's a new problem that you've identified, you don't have to steal your competitors' customers. Everybody's looking for something to enter and to be a part of. So oftentimes in trying to get a feel for, well, what's a real need, we look for problems. We don't necessarily ask somebody, would you like a product that did this? You try and get a sense of, well, for existing products or existing problems that are out there, where are you having some issues? So there's a department on campus called the Fischel Department of Bioengineering. There's a person named Robert Fischel. He's an inventor, predominantly in biomedical and medical devices. And he goes to doctors. He goes to hospitals. He goes to ERs. He asks doctors, what's your problem? Why does he do that?
See if it can help him.
See how he can help. What procedures are you doing that you don't have the right equipment? What types of measurements are you trying to do that you're not getting a lot of accuracy or a lot of reliability in those measurements? Are there things that you do on a regular basis that are awkward? And I'm going to go home and invent something for you. And he has, I think, upwards of 300 patents. So far, he's contributed $31 million to the university. What's it tell you when somebody can donate $31 million?
It's true hard.
They have at least 31, and probably a fair amount more than that. He builds nothing. He manufactures nothing. He sells no product. How do you get wealthy by doing that?
He comes up with the idea and sells the idea.
He essentially licenses the concepts. Doesn't necessarily license the idea, but licenses the invention. So if you're going to have a heart stent, something that's going to be implanted in your heart, and it's going to hold open channels for blood to flow in, why might you want to license that to large companies that are in that business versus going at it on your own?
The large companies, I mean, they probably have more money, more resources to start a business. I mean,
They have the tens of millions of dollars that it takes to go through and do the research, to do the clinical trials, to work with the FDA, to roll that out, to commercialize it. And if you were in the business of looking for a heart stent, are you going to buy Bob's Heart Stents? So there's a branding element there as well. You tend to buy from the companies that you know. And he's done it, again, fundamentally, by going in and talking to doctors about what they need and keeps delivering solutions to them. So what we can do in a fairly efficient way, as we have ideas, you can talk with customers directly, but what you see here is if you go to Amazon, search on any product that you wish, and you'll see some level of returns. So for this, I searched on iPhone 5 speaker docks, and I get upwards of 9,000 results. And with these, and again, if you've searched on Amazon before, you know that you can go, you can search, you can find, you can search by category, you can read about the product, you can see a picture, you can see a price. What else do you see?
Reviews of the product.
You see reviews of the product. And in this scenario, for this first product, I have 192 reviews. For the second product, I have 1,305. For the third product, I have 366. So add those up, and you're approaching 2,000 reviews of people that bought, own, and have used these iPhone 5 speaker docks. How else would I get 2,000 people to tell me what they like and what they dislike about an iPhone 5 speaker dock if I don't do this? What else could I do?
You could ask them,
Who is them?
customers of iPhone 5 speaker dock.
How do you find them?
Go to the store.
You go to the store. So Best Buy is just going to let you post up shop?
Yeah.
No.
Being inconvenient.
So again, can't, with any degree of scale or reliability, go to retailers. They're not going to tell you information about their customers. And customers probably aren't going to take the time to talk to you.
I'd say go to the discussion boards online, the Apple discussion boards, where they can.
Okay. You could do something similar. So you could go to the retailers and see how consumers have rated products, or you could go to the enthusiast sites, the Apple discussion boards. So again, another platform of let me go online and find people talking about these products.
You could establish a customer service line.
Say again.
You could establish a customer service line.
Okay. How does that work?
Well, customers would call the phone line for any complaints that they have about the product.
Okay. How are they going to get your information to call you, and how are you going to resolve their problem?
Well, you could post the number online or something for the website.
Post the number online. So take a step back again. You have an idea for entering this market. So you're not in the market yet. You're trying to figure out, if I were to enter this market and design an iPhone 5 speaker dock, what should be the features, the functions, the price point, etc. So again, you're at a point that you're not equipped to solve problems. You haven't sold any product yet. You're simply just trying to understand what do people like and dislike about the products.
Like when they have to register it, like for a warranty or something like that, have them fill out a survey.
But you're jumping ahead a bit. So, and what I mean by this is that for Logitech, the middle brand here, or for Bose, you're both right. If I'm Logitech, I should have a customer service line to resolve complaints. If I'm Logitech, I should have a product warranty registration system. But I'm saying if you want to compete against Logitech, if you want to compete against Bose, how do you get customers to tell you how they feel about your competitors' products and services?
Telemarketing.
Telemarketing. How do you find people that are owners of these products?
Just randomly call people. I don't know.
Randomly call people. How many people here have an iPhone 5 speaker dock?
I haven't.
So perhaps 3. So for every 1,000 phone calls we make, we find 10% of the people even have it. If somebody calls you and wants to talk to you about your iPhone 5 speaker dock, you going to talk to them?
No.
And of the 10% that answer the phone, none are going to talk to us.
They know that I have.
And there's an expense. It costs money to do that. This, free, aside from your time. What else do we do when we go out and are considering a higher item purchase? If you're going to spend a couple $100s on something, particularly electronics, what do you typically do?
Good, cheaper, better alternatives.
But how do you decide which ones you want to buy?
You go to the store and try it first.
You go to the store and try it out. What else should you do?
Ask your friends.
Ask friends. What else?
For reviews.
You look for reviews. And so in that way, not only might you look at consumer reviews, but you look at the expert reviews. You look at the reviews that are written by the magazines that cover automotives or electronics or refrigerators or whatever it is that you're considering. But again, the expert reviews give you some perspective, but I'd rather have 2,000 people tell me their experience as a user over time. One fault with a lot of the expert reviews is they're reviewing the new product. They don't necessarily review the product after it's been used for 6 months or a year. So in that way, again, very valuable to go in and do this type of thing when you can go through and find people that are owners, that are users, that do it relatively real time, in mass, and you have a big volume of content here that you're able to work with, and you can go into and read these individual reviews, and you can see most helpful or favorable reviews. You would read the critical reviews. You could see some scale of how many people really liked it, how many people didn't like it, and you can get a lot of good information this way on the cheap and relatively fast. You don't have to build a survey. You don't have to worry about how do I find people that own these products, and if I find them, how do I incentivize them to respond? You simply go in and see what do people like and don't like. What's the problem with doing your research this way and only this way?
You have a biased set of people.
You may have a biased set of people. And some people criticize Yelp and some of these other platforms of that if I'm a restaurant owner, am I just going to go in once a day and give my restaurant a 5-star rating? And that's difficult to manage. So there might be some element of fraud involved with it to be mindful of. Any other problems with this?
They got a faulty product that didn't work.
You don't know necessarily the representativeness of what they're saying. Did they get a product? When they pulled it out of the mailbox, they dropped it. And then when they took it in their home and opened it up, it was broken. So again, there's some element of it being somewhat of an uncontrolled environment. Yep.
Most of the times on these reviews, like, you have differing views on it, so it's like inconsistent because
Okay.
I don't like it.
There's some level of inconsistency. In this model, we see out of 1,300, it's at about 4.5 stars on a 5-star scale. So we see some measure of consistency, and we see kind of an even curve where there are 50 and 30 and 70 people that really didn't like it, but 300 and 800 that do. So you want to look at all of the above. You want to get some sense of, for the ones that like, what themes are central, and I might want to incorporate those elements into my design. And for the ones that don't like, are there things there that I can recognize and perhaps solve or resolve in your design?
I was just going to say this market is only showing people who, first of all, are using the internet and are also willing to go back and review it.
Okay.
You're going to get less people from.
So it's a smaller population of it's people that are taking the time to do. And you tend to see people do this type of commenting on the outer bounds. People that are really happy take the time to make comment. People that are very dissatisfied take the time to make comment. If you bought it and it's okay and it does what you thought it would, you're probably, on average, not going to take the time to review. So again, there's some of those survey biases to think about. But in the absence of what your other options are, I'm not exactly sure how you would affordably find owners, particularly 2,000 owners, to get 2,000 pieces of feedback on an iPhone 5 speaker dock, if not to do things like this. So helpful in understanding the market and understanding the need. So again, all that factors into being able to think about, I've got an idea, I've got a concept, let me go out, do a little bit of research, see what consumers think about it, and so that's our starting point. And from there, it's an element of, well, what can I do? How do I build? How do I develop? What do I do about it? And what's the future of that, and how are things evolving? And in that platform, it gives you the opportunity to go out and do a little bit more further research to gather information about customer preferences. And at that stage, you can think about the element of groups and surveys and focus groups. Anybody been in a focus group? You know what I mean by focus group? Now, what's a focus group?
Focus group is a bunch of people who are selected by a company who wants to do product testing.
Okay.
And there's
What's a bunch?
people who they believe would,
Like, what's a number?
it can be anywhere from like 6 to, I'd say, even 100.
Okay. Tends to be relatively small groups, so single digits, maybe a few dozen people, but the orientation of let's put people in a room as a group and talk to them about their experiences, likes, dislikes, etc. And the idea there is it's a bit more informal. You begin to see where people are feeding off of one another's ideas and contributing to things. Different than an interview, which is typically a one-to-one. An interview different than a survey, as surveys are often written. And with those surveys, typically they are objective in that you're checking the box, you're agreeing, you're disagreeing, you're rating things on a scale. Interviews are a little more open-ended. You can respond, you can inquire, you can ask why and what and how in a different way. And so all of those are things you can do to get some sense of what they've done, what they're doing, and what are they thinking about doing. And in that way, it helps to either validate that the idea that you have is indeed a good idea and a marketable idea, perhaps, versus something that might have been an interesting concept, but there might not be a market for it, at least in its current conception. When you go through and think about, well, how do I find data? How do I find market research? And there are endless resources for that. This is part of a list of tools that Steve Blank, who is active in the entrepreneurship education space, has identified. And these are a few that I would start with that gives you some sense of broadly research on public companies, how large are markets, how many dollars are spent in certain industries, geographies, things of that nature. You can learn about website traffic and populations and trends and growth. From there, you can go through and look at specific business statistics. So there are different sets of databases that are geared toward things like census. What's the census?
When a government counts up how many people there are in a population
Okay.
area.
So census looks at things like population by area, by geography, by zip code, by age.
Yeah, no, it's just, I mean, look, it has a bunch of stats of the nation as a whole and different ethnicities.
Okay.
Different,
So they're looking at gender, and they're looking at education, so a host of different stats. Why does that matter? Why might you, for a given zip code, want to know about the people there?
I mean, it's so you can target a certain group of people, like elders.
Okay. So if you're considering serving a certain market, either locating operations there or selling your product there or investing your money in marketing dollars there, you want to know, well, who's there and who are they? This is a central way that restaurants decide where to locate. This is a central way that they decide, where do we build malls? Where are we going to locate new apartment buildings? It's what's the population that's there? How has it changed? And then doing some analysis and thinking about how is it going to change. There's also data that looks at venture capital. The PwC money tree is a big one. And with that, you can see for free, and all of these are free resources, you can see where a venture capital is putting their money, what types of industries, what geographies, how many companies did they invest in, what was the stage of those companies, how much did they invest on average per company, per industry, per region. And so in that way, it gives you some sense of what's going on in the market space. Lots of other resources that are there, and all of these are links that you can go back to later. So with all of these links, you can go in and see things on a national level, on an international level, of being able to capture and understand what's going on in these markets. So again, pages and pages of links that you can use based on what it is you're trying to do, where you're trying to do it, but there's no shortage of market data out there. In many cases, governments and states are investing and measuring this. Why do they do that? Why does a county or a state put dozens or hundreds of people to work collecting data on this type of thing?
I mean, I know at least for some people, at least my state delegate, that he looks at those stats in order to best serve his community.
Okay, so there's an element of when it comes to things like federal aid programs, when it comes to things like economic development, when it comes to attracting businesses, they want to have a good representation of here's who we are and here's why we would be a good fit for what it is that they're trying to attract.
Well, ultimately, it would benefit them, like, economically and financially, because if they give the data, then they'll track certain businesses into that state, so they would get with taxes.
Yep. So if you can say, here's the income profile of our folks, here's the education profile of our folks, here's the number of people that we have, here's the number of perhaps young people that we have, if that's a market that people are targeting. So in that way, they spend a lot of time doing that, and they make it publicly available, again, available to you as well, to be able to go through and see what's going on in the market. So with that, you can do a lot of things, you can have a lot of ideas, you can go through and you can recognize that there are market needs, you can do some research and validate those needs, but then there's the question of, well, what do I do? I have my iPhone 5 speaker dock idea, and I've gone through and I have 30 things that people want. If I ask you if you like something, you may say yes. If I tell you what it costs, your mind may change. So it gives you the opportunity to say, do you like this set of features for this price or this set of features for this price? And again, you're doing this all before you have manufactured a thing. You're doing this all before you have prototyped anything. You're still in the process of trying to understand what it is that we should desire and what products and services make sense for the market that we're trying to compete in. And in that way, that's what we mean by this separation and ranking of preferences. And then it gives you some sense of what exactly do you want to do. So in summary, when you are beginning to think about entrepreneurial ideas, we want to recognize and try and seek those real needs and wants. And we also want to recognize the role that price plays as we consider what we might want to bring to the market. The way that we do that is first to research creatively. So you may not necessarily have the time or budget to do elaborate market research, but through some of the tools and techniques we've talked about today, it gives you some insights on what you can do with reasonable accuracy, fairly quickly, and fairly affordably. What you also are going to need to do is use some level of your own intuition. So in that way, if you're truly doing something innovative, by definition, it should be a bit new. And maybe there are competitors out there now or in the past that you can learn from, but at the end of the day, you're probably going to be trying to bring some things to market that you're not going to find perfect market research to align with. And so you're applying some of your own experiences, you're applying some of your own background, you're applying some of your own know-how and analysis to evaluate the research that you're finding. And then lastly, and arguably the most importantly, is to think about market segments and niches. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but fundamentally, we want you to think about, is there a specific market, a narrow market that you can begin to serve, that you can build your brand there, that you can really work to understand that customer, and that you can begin to build your skills and abilities and capabilities to launch into bigger markets later. But it gives you a foothold, and it gives you an entryway into entering a market, and you can even specialize within that in a better way than many of the existing competitors.